The world is complicated beyond comprehension, right? And you only see a very little bit of it. And the way you structure your understanding is you make assumptions about things, and they're simplifying assumptions. So if you trust someone, you reduce their complexity massively, right? Because, like, let's say we were married, then there's a whole bunch of ways that you're going to act that are going to be simpler. Okay, so then I can tolerate being around you in some sense because you're not everything at once. Now, those simplifying structures are hierarchically assembled, and some of them are far more important than others. Trust is one of them, especially trust in loved ones, family members, which is why betrayal by a family member is really catastrophic, because it destabilizes your past, right? All the memories you have. It destabilizes your present. It destabilizes your future. It shakes your faith in human beings, including yourself. And everything collapses. And that's an ego death. And so, now underneath the ego, as far as Jung was concerned, was another structure that he called the self. And the self is this thing that remains constant across ego deaths. But it's deeper and less personal. It's archetypal. And it's the thing that the ego collapses into when it collapses, and then that rebuilds the ego. That's a story of betrayal. For example, maybe in one of your relatively uninformed flurries, you ended up establishing a relationship with someone who was really not good for you. And that might mean, well, it was just a bad personality match. Or it might mean they really weren't good for you, because, you know, you can get pretty unlucky and you can get tangled up with someone who's very deceitful and very malevolent and who could care less about you, or maybe who even wants to hurt you. And then you can establish a trusting relationship with them, or at least you trust them, and then one day, you know, you find out that they are not who they said they were, or even more importantly, they are not who you thought they were. And so then maybe you're in a committed relationship and they betray you with someone else. And so then you think, well, there you are at home, and you're perfectly happy about being at home, and then your partner comes home, and for one reason or another you find out that they're having an affair, or that they've betrayed you, or that they've lied to you in some other spectacularly important way. And maybe it's a lover, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a sibling, and maybe it's a friend, whatever. It doesn't matter. And so here's a way of thinking about it. The minute before they come home, you're in one place. And you remember, a place isn't just a place, right? A place is a place in time, because we live in space-time. We live in time and place. And what that means is you can be in the same place in 1 minute and a completely different place in the next minute, even if you haven't even moved. And so place is a very, very complicated idea. So you're sitting at home and you're watching Oprah, and you're perfectly content to do that, and then the person comes home and the bottom of your world falls out. And then all of a sudden you're not where you thought you were. And it's a really weird place that you are now, because it's not where you were, that's for sure. But you also don't know where it is, because you don't know who that person is that's in that room with you. You don't know what your past with them was, or what it meant, or anything else about it, because it was predicated on absolute misperceptions. So none of your memories about those events are valid, even though you have them as memories. And then you have a worse problem, which is if you're betrayed badly enough, not only are you not going to understand your immediate past with that person, oh, and by the way, your future's also gone, so that's a big problem, as is your present has become radically more complex. My observation has been that if there's a tight relationship, and if one party is betrayed by the other in that manner, that it's almost always irreconcilable. It breaks it. And you know, I've helped people try to struggle through that, on both sides of it, the person who was betrayed and the person who did the betrayal. I've seen people grow up and not do it again, and this was in situations where their partner didn't know. And in a couple of those situations, it seemed to me that it might have even been a necessary learning experience for the person who did it. You know, it helped them develop. That doesn't mean I'm justifying it, but life is complicated. But I think that society works better, all things considered, when you make a promise and you stick to it. And one of the things I learned from reading Jung, which I really liked, was he believed that, and he had his affairs too, so you might think about it as somewhat hypocritical, but I think that people can make mistakes without having what they think necessarily be wrong. He said that there are things in a marriage that you can't have unless you're all in. And I believe that. And so if there's a back door open, or to begin with, or a back door opens, then I think that there's something about the relationship that is lacking at least, and I think you pay a big price for that. So, it depends on whether you regard a marriage as a practical arrangement or a spiritual arrangement. Now, really, it's both, and both are important. But if it's a spiritual arrangement or a psychological arrangement above all, then I do think that you don't get the transformation without being all in. And if you violate it, then even if you can work it out with your partner, there's something that you will never get as a consequence. This means that none of us should identify in the most fundamental sense with what we currently know and presume. Means as well that we should all come to understand that, so that we do not remain confused about who we are. This means that it is never sufficient to be conservative or to identify with the past, or to become ideologically or dogmatically committed, or to remain stubbornly anachronistic and unchanged. The environment transforms headlong around us, and we all must run as fast as we can, as Ellis's Red Queen well knew, just to stay in the same place. It is not sufficient either to abandon tradition and structure entirely in a headlong and irresponsible rush towards the anomalous and revolutionary. Structure is insufficient, but it is still necessary, and the ethical requirement for respecting and maintaining it is still of paramount import. We each must as well similarly avoid falling prey to the temptation of identifying with the chaotic, depressing, anxiety-ridden, and nihilism-inducing state of affairs engendered by the terrible confrontation with the genuinely unknown. Even when thrust into the underworld by the dread events of our life, we must not characterize ourselves as permanent inhabitants of that dark and dread place, lest we lose hope, despair, and seek revenge. To progress psychologically, you must let go, sacrifice, time and again in the face of successive obstacles. You must abandon those things that, and often those people who, are impeding your progress, despite the fact that you may have held them very close to your heart. When you're wrong, when you've missed the mark, when you've sinned, because that is the meaning of sin, you must let the part of you that is wrong and aiming improperly die. Then you must allow the new spirit manifesting itself within to spring to life.